Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is John Hartledge. As you can see from this shot, there is a lot in the screen, but that's because we're going full-on mixology today. One of my subscribers asked me to do a bourbon episode. So if I'm gonna do bourbon, I'm gonna make a cocktail or two. Let's chat wine, let's chat bourbon. So, bourbon. Bourbon is a type of whiskey that, to be called bourbon, first of all, can only be produced in the United States. Now, here's the phrase to remember. All bourbon is whiskey, but all whiskey is not bourbon. So bourbon is a type of whiskey usually associated with Kentucky, but it is a type of whiskey that has to be at least 51% corn. The other grains are usually filled out in the mash before they distill to produce the alcohol. The other grains are wheat, barley, and wheat, barley, corn, and rye. Rye, and you know the term rye, there is a rye, and that's at least 51% rye, and those are usually very dry. They work very nice for cocktails because you're gonna add sweetness with the making of a cocktail. But this is a bourbon, 51% corn, and the other adjudicating factor, if you will, is at least 2 years minimum aging in new charred oak barrels. And that's it. So that's why in any state in the United States, you can produce a bourbon as long as you hit those couple of benchmarks. There's a few other benchmarks and stipulations with proofing, but those are the primary ones. Now, today, I decided to pick a bourbon that wasn't so high in proof. Now, proof can be a little confusing. Your actual alcohol by volume times 2 is your proof. So a 80 proof is not 80% alcohol. 80 proof is 40% alcohol, and 40% is actually on the low end for many bourbons. But for me, I come at this with most of my experience in wine and my palate starting as a wine specialist. So spirits can sometimes be a little bit strong for my palate. So I tend to like the lower proof or the lower alcohol percentages, particularly if I'm going to make a cocktail. And then the other issue is this, and I was actually recently doing a mixology class for some guests, and it was about half men and half women. And I usually win over the hearts of the women when I highlight the fact that a woman's palate is so sensitive. Actually, the tradition in German beer making was to have women as the beer makers because women's palates are so attuned to flavor. Men's palates just they like everything really big, and men love a big malty burn and alcohol feel of a whiskey or a bourbon or a scotch, straight up, maybe one ice cube on the rocks, if you will. But it tends to be a drink that's really strong for a women's palate, and most women don't prefer bourbon. There are always exceptions. So when I want to have a bourbon and present it to a group of many tastes, I prefer to make a cocktail and make that cocktail still play the flavor of the bourbon, but a little more mass appeal and not so strong on the flavor of just bourbon, and mix some other things. So we're gonna do a classic Manhattan. We're gonna taste it. We're gonna do a classic Manhattan, which really does play the bourbon, and that, you know, anyone would like. But usually the people who like a Manhattan like bourbon. And then we're gonna make a Blackberry Smash. So a Blackberry Bourbon Maple Smash, real nice seasonal cocktail, but any time of year that the richness of a blackberry, that little bit of maple syrup, that earthiness really goes fine with a bourbon, and it does take away some of that burn that you can get from the alcohol. So I picked the Four Roses, very reasonably priced. I was in the shop, and one of the shop owners is a big bourbon guy, and he said, well, if you spend over $40 on your bourbon and you make it into a cocktail, it's sacrilege. So I said, I'm glad you said that. In deference to your taste and anyone in my audience who loves bourbon, I'm going to pick a lower proof bourbon under $30, and I'll make a cocktail with it. He said, that sounds like a good plan. I said, I'm glad you approve. So this runs 80 proof, so 40%, $24 retail. Really reasonable. My guess is at the lower proof, this isn't always true, at the lower proof, it's not going to be quite so dry. It's going to be a little more malty, a touch sweet. Now, one thing I'm not going to do is put that on my palate like a glass of wine, as I've done that before, and that's a mistake because it's too hot. Your better thing with a spirit is to kind of swirl the glass, even if it's a snifter, swirl the glass and smell the spirit from a distance. Don't put the nose right down in the glass like you do for a wine. Actually, keep a good 3-4 inches above that rim of that glass so that you're not directly inhaling and burning, singeing the nose hairs, if you will. Yeah, so I actually smell a little bit of the corn, but there's a little graininess. There's a little bit of maltiness. It seems very nice. I'm not going to chew this one like I would a wine. I'm just going to swallow it. I swallow a little bit right away and then breathe a little. I'm not even squeegeeing the tongue. I'm not trying to savor down on the taste because it's so strong. Just breathing. And it's more of a feeling of malt and light amount of sweetness, but not enough to say this is a sweet liquid. Just this little essence of sweet malt. Nice. I think it'll make a beautiful cocktail. So now we're gonna play that cocktail with this glass and some of our larger cubes. We're gonna do a Manhattan. So a Manhattan is a classic cocktail made with equal parts bourbon or whiskey. I love Crown Royal in a Manhattan, but equal parts bourbon and vermouth. So vermouth is a wine-based product. It's a wine kind of infused with a lot of aromatics and roots and berries, really popular and was produced in northern Italy. And really, really interesting aperitif, if you will, but works beautifully, almost like a bitters or digestive, if you will. Let's go ahead and measure. So we're gonna do equal parts. I love this jigger because one side's 2 ounces, the other side is 1 ounce. And then it has the little measurements inside for 1.5 ounces, classic shot. I'm doing 2 ounces. Then the other side for when we go to cocktailing is 1 whole ounce. It has a 3/4 and it has a half. So it really is handy. So I like the nice, bigger ice cubes if you're doing a Manhattan. So I did say equal parts. This is Atsby vermouth, not Italian, but beautiful vermouth made in upstate New York. So it's fun to find something local, whether it's local to your own state or just, within the region that you typically inhabit. And I am gonna do just a little dash of bitters. Angostura, very common brand. Bitters, very very high alcohol actually. You just use a few dabs, just a few little splashes. Very high alcohol actually, also called a digestive. It's very common to have a little soda water with the bitters to calm the stomach. Again, a lot of roots and berries. Oh, very similar. A for Atsbury. There we go. Okay, now last touch. Really nice cherries. So this isn't the ice cream shop style of cherries. We're using, I'm using the syrup from the Luxardo Maraschino cherries, but I actually thawed out frozen, really nice organic frozen cherries, and I dropped them into the Luxardo syrup. I thought that'd be fun. It's a really big cherry flavor. So it just makes the cherry flavor a little more present, but you can certainly use the regular Maraschino Luxardo. They're delicious cherries. Just around a little bit. And I'm using the toothpick just so they can be grabbed. But I like to get a little bit of the juice in there and then just whoosh, drop it in. And then, maybe I need a longer toothpick, but that's okay. I'm just gonna be careful when I sip it. Now when I sip this, I'm expecting just a little mix of flavors. Delicious. So the vermouth really calms down the punch of that whiskey. And it's really excellent cocktail. The cherry is going to be the little thing you have at the end. So you finish the drink and then you have that little cherry. By then it's soaked up a little bit of that cocktail, and that'll be delicious. Next, a Blackberry Smash. So this is actually, I can't wait to make this. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put as much ice it takes to fill this glass. I'm using crushed ice. Okay, so as much as it takes, and then I'm going to put all that ice into my shaker, because all I'm going to do is I'm going to shake, get it nice and blended, and go right back into that glass. So I'm going to need my lime, because we're going to make a garnish. I need a couple of blackberries, yes. And I took the liberty of making some blackberry syrup and also some maple cinnamon syrup. And here's the rule of thumb in syrups. Twice as much sugar as liquid. So 2 parts sugar, 1 part water. And in this case, I used agave, and of course this was maple. But agave syrup is a little more natural, a little more artisanal, a little more gourmet. So that's how I did that one. It's beautiful, and you just get it to a simmer. I put 1 pint of blackberries in there with twice the amount of agave to water. Loosen that up, mash the blackberries a little, stirred it around, and then a little trick: I put it over my my strainer with my funnel, and it strains out beautifully, and I end up with this beautiful syrup, which you'll see when I start to pour these. So we're going to start with our 2 ounces of bourbon. Excellent. And we're going to go to our fresh lime juice. And we're going to cut that right here for just a moment. I'm going to come back to the same exact spot. And let's pull this up. Lime juice. Okay, so equal parts lime juice and blackberry syrup. And for that, we're going to use 3/4 ounce. So here we go. This is 100% key lime. Really present acidity. You could use lime. You could use lemon. I really liked, when I was testing this, I really liked the lime juice with it. So the same, and you're going to see how this blackberry syrup pours out. It's really beautiful. If you can see that color. Wow. Wonderful. Against my white shirt. My blackberry syrup, and let's bring in a little earthiness with the maple. That's going to be, wow, it's going to be delicious. So we're just using a 1/2 ounce of this. So yep, bring that in. Yes. Now, the thing about cocktailing, you get a feel for the recipes and for balances. You can look at a basic recipe, and here's the ingredients, and you'll kind of get a feel for how much of each to use. You know, basically, you're going to use about 2 ounces for a cocktail, about 2 ounces of spirit. Whatever that driver spirit is, you're going to use about 2 ounces total of alcohol. Then you're going to fill the rest in with support. The rest of the support is about a 3-to-1. 6 ounces of support, 2 ounces of liquor. And that's about what we're going to get by the time we shake this, because we had 2 ounces of support, 2 ounces of liquor, and probably 2 ounces of water once we really shake it. So we have the citrus, we have 2 syrups, and we have the bourbon. Oh, beautiful. So now I'm going to pour in. It's because I shook it so vigorously, it got really nice and frothy. Look at that beautiful color, and I love to see the foam on top. Now let's cut a lime wheel. So we're going to go like that. We're going to just the edge. I'm cutting that just on the edge of the rind, so I turn that cut side over nice and thick, so it'll sit on the glass. Oh, beautiful. So now you can do it like that. Just pop it down in, or if you want, you can put the blackberry on top. It's really, what I think it's really nice to do in cocktailing is to highlight some ingredient with your garnish. But look at that, let's go the double effect. A couple blackberries, a little lime. It's kind of dressy. You could also put that lime wheel on the very bottom, and then it's all of a sudden a little surprise, and just have the blackberries float on top. You put that lime wheel on the bottom. That's really cool, because all that ice is going to hold that lime down there. You know, pop those blackberries on top. But that's also a fun little way to do it. You can go like this, and like that. Let's taste it. New meaning to the little milky smile mustache, right? Really nice balance. I really like the lime juice. There's just a real present citrus to balance the obvious sugar, and it kind of brings out that, almost makes it bright, that blackberry flavor. It's a delicious cocktail. So we have a Manhattan Classic with beautiful maraschino juice-soaked cherries, with the Four Roses bourbon. And remember, good bourbon is whiskey, but all whiskey cannot be bourbon. Bourbon from the United States, one of America's most famous productions. Well, I have to send out a personal shout out and thank you to Mark Hayward of Mark Hayward Drum Company in Florida. Yes, that's a plug. He asked for the bourbon episode, and I agreed in my comment back to him, because he was commenting to me on the YouTube channel. And I knew kind of what it would entail, but as you can see, I said before, I'm looking at this table, and that's the one thing about bartending, about mixology, and about cocktailing. It really is about physics and logistics. Everything's got to be close by, and there's a lot of physics that goes into it, and it is quite amazing when all that comes together. But it's a little more involved than tasting a bottle of wine, I guess. But I really appreciate you joining me for this and hanging in there with this episode. I certainly had a blast. I hope you try these cocktails. Everyone, if you haven't had the Manhattan, that's a definite you have to try. But please do try the Blackberry Bourbon Maple Smash. It's delicious. And please join me again. Now subscribe, and don't forget to ring the bell, because then you'll get notifications when I got a new episode. Sip a little bit, come back and visit me. Let's chat wine.